Good evening, everyone. It is about 7:25 on Tuesday, February 23rd. We're going to open the Finance Committee meeting for Tuesday, February 23rd, 2021. Let's do some introductions, starting, if I can, with Dick, please.
All right. Dick Vandenberg, FinCom member.
Sandy Kuipers, Finance Committee.
Heather Moore, Finance Committee.
Lynn Mazzulli, Finance Committee.
And Howard D'Amico, Finance Committee Chair. So we had a procedural event tonight before we opened the record. We expected to have Blackstone Valley Tech appear tonight and present. They had some technical issues and they were not able to join via Zoom. We've agreed with them to reschedule them for the March 9th Finance Committee meeting. They'll be scheduled in at about 7:45 p.m. and notices will go out. The new post will post that as part of that meeting's agenda. So from there then, what I'd like to do, Matt has joined us live. Matt, would you like to give us a presentation of status on budget-related issues, please?
Sure. I could make snide comments about the overall success of the remote learning effort at BVT. The superintendent can't get on Zoom, but I won't go there.
I think you just did.
No, I didn't.
Go ahead. Proceeding.
I've got to say that probably in the last 8 years, I haven't had to work with as much budget uncertainty as I have right now. And I would have thought, if it's okay, I can't hear myself.
Yeah, thank you.
I did come in here because the echo on my computer from this TV was a bit much. Hey, don't worry about me. Really, I don't go anywhere. If anything, I'm going to give you little kid germs. I would have thought it was last year because I fully expected the Commonwealth to do what it has done in the past, which is share some of its budgetary uncertainty and troubles with the municipalities. And this year they really, they have made a huge commitment not to do that. And so our aid has been cut and we're not really looking at any changes in our state funding that aren't driven by programmatic realities. So enrollment is down in the Douglas Public Schools. So our Chapter 70 reflects a slight decrease. So really on the revenue side, I think we're in a robust position. I think our forecast is very conservative. Gene always gives us very responsible parameters to work within. So I don't really anticipate revenue shortfalls of any kind, so that's not the struggle. The struggle is just putting the pieces together, and just COVID delayed almost everything. So we are negotiating with police and fire unions now. I have built into my budget forecast the management position going into those discussions, and have been leaving some upside potential on the bottom line so that if we compromise from our management position, we wouldn't be looking for resources to backfill them. But I haven't budgeted them specifically to that department because I don't want to make any promises to anybody about what might be there. We are striving toward a year with a 1% COLA because most of the economic indicators for the Northeast are that we are in a very low inflationary period. So if you call it cost of living adjustment, and many cities and towns are looking at 1s or 1.5s, and we're not seeing a lot of higher numbers than that. So I don't want to be the outlier on the upside of that. So right now our opening position it's protected by the ground rules of our negotiation. I won't get into exactly what they are, but 1%, as you know, I try to get everyone on the same COLA schedule. So right now my budget's based on 1% for all employees, regardless of whether they are represented by a union or not. I would like, on the personnel side of things, to budget to a reality where we are taking into consideration our status as an employer and the way we treat the people who work here, especially those people who have worked for the town with good and faithful service for a very long time. Our compensation system has 10 steps, and they are annual steps. So once a person comes in, if they get hired at step 1, they get a step every year for 10 years, and then nothing but a COLA. And there were years, I want to say, in the 2011 to 2014 timeframe, at least once or twice, where the town either didn't pay steps or a COLA or both for at least 1 or 2 of those years.
We never did a step freeze for a couple.
Did step freezes, and COLAs have been on the table from time to time. I know the collective bargaining units went a couple of years without COLAs. So that being the case, you know, we've got 2 issues. One, our table didn't move with the rest of the economy, and so we might be slightly behind in some positions, and that needs investigation. That takes a longer duration. In the short term, when I look over the roster and I see there have been people who have worked here 15, 20 or more years and haven't had anything other than a COLA, that troubles me. You know, I think we should have some sort of longevity program. If somebody has been here that long and they're not doing a good job, then shame on the town administrator for not moving them along, or the department head. If somebody's been here that long and doing a great job, we shouldn't just freeze them at the top step and leave them there. Not every department head, and not every certainly not many of our day-to-day employees, has access to a contractual relationship with the town. Massachusetts general laws only allow certain positions to be retained on an employment contract. Everybody else has to be under the personnel bylaw. So I'm trying to estimate how much that would cost and then align the resources to be able to do that. You'd only be on the hook for it as a town so long as that employee was here. And if they leave, you know, then their replacement would be hired at a much lower grade and wouldn't be eligible for longevity. So that's something I really feel strongly about trying to do, and I'm going to do. I'm going to propose it, whether or not everybody goes along with
Will
it.
we see that this term?
This fiscal year is where I'd like to do that. What are some of the things that are making it hard to do?
When will we see that?
That's what I'm getting to. So I know that because our ground rules that we always have 2 meetings ahead of us with our bargaining units, I know that we won't, if even the most optimistic scenario, we won't have a tentative agreement with our 2 public safety unions until at least the end of March. So I would say, and looking back in the past, March 17th to 25th is typically when the town administrator really actually has something to show you, and I think that's going to be the pattern this year. What's making everything difficult, I think I've already mentioned to FinCom and to the Board of Selectmen on more than one occasion that there's some uncertainty in our health insurance working rate for next year. We've had this weird sort of, so we had the big spike and then we had a sharp shortfall. And then it looks like the timing of claims, we ended up having 1 month where we had almost a week's worth of claims not show up until the following month. Some of that may just be billing practice, but I think some of it had to do with the calendar turned over to a new month in the middle of a week or something. There was some weirdness that occurred. And so we spiked again, and now we're back down. And if you look at the average of those last 3 months, they'd be more typical. But what it's doing is it's forcing us to wait another month to see if the picture improves or not, so that we can figure out exactly where we stand. On paper, if you follow the underwriter's logic to the bitter end, we would be, because of claims experience, we would be lined up for a double-digit increase year over year, which wipes out our ability to do anything. I'm optimistic, and so is the consultant that manages the health group, that we will come back down to normal, that what we were looking at was just a post-COVID spike of elective procedures that, now that we're all caught up, it's going to come back down. And I agree with that. I think that's a correct prognosis. We also have a substantial equity buy-in. So when we formed the group, we had to front-load cash, and we did this at town meeting. It was free cash, I'm looking at Gene, that we assigned to be able to buy into the group and have enough of a cushion if we had a spike in claims, we'd be able to satisfy them. We've never spent that, and last year, the fund as a whole had a very large surplus because, again, COVID shut down the hospital, so a lot of our people didn't go and file claims. So some combination of Douglas's share of the surplus and our equity buy-in is available to the town to offset one bad year of claims. The way you do that, the mechanics though, you don't just do it for 1 year, you have to smooth yourself out over 2 so that you gradually climb back to where you're going to be. The employees pay a share of this, so we don't want to hit them with a spike. That's one reason. The other is we want to see how we do. So we don't want to put all our eggs in one basket, spend all our equity in 1 year, and then have nothing for the next year. So right now, my budget forecast says we'll budget against a 6% year-over-year increase. It was 1 point something 1 year and 2% last year, ridiculously low levels. Looking at more like a 6. So if we take a 9 or a 10 and pare it down to a 6, we might be in pretty good shape. That's bad news. One other piece of bad news, we're looking at a really absurd increase in our property and casualty lines. And that's the result of really 6 or 7 years running of significant property claims. Leaky roofs, the water pipe burst at the school was the worst by far. Then a few weeks back, it's almost like we have a rain cloud that follows us around. But a fully engineered design failed. And our fuel pump that takes fuel from our big tank outside and puts it into a little tank that we use for the daily demand of the building. There's a pump that fills it. It actually tops off our day tank. The day pump fails. It created some sort of ridiculous pressure thing, and we end up with 300 gallons of number 2 heating fuel on the floor of a building built in 1927. I think you can see where the narrative's going to go. There was a gap between the wall and the floor when the addition was built for the gym, yada, yada, yada. We are in the middle of a remediation that so far is 28,000, but it's probably going to be $250,000 by the time we're done. So what that means is our claims are approximately 350 to 400% of premium. So that's bad on its own. We've tried to shop the business. Before the spill started, we were trying to shop the business, not really to save money, but to try to get some rate stability going out, find a different carrier other than Maya. And we've approached 4 carriers. 2 have said, ixnay and the bixnay, we're not going there. The other 2 carriers have been much more creative. They've been thoughtful about, because we have many lines. It's not just property. We have, senior officer liability. We have a whole bunch of lines where we don't have any claims and we're very strong. The thought by some of these more creative carriers is that if we can accept a higher deductible on our strong lines, we might be able to win back enough premium flexibility to offset the obvious increase in our property liability, casualty that's going to go up. I like that. I'm glad that there's a couple of carriers that are willing to talk to us like that. So we're not going to save any money, but we might be able to think better about it. But all of this comes in the context of Maya, because Maya invests in, it's a creature of the Massachusetts Municipal Association, so it is directly engaged in trying to help us. So that's an open conversation, but I think you're looking at about $100,000 increase in that premium. So insurance is not good news for us this year. In our corner, we're probably not going to have a school transportation bill that's as high as normal. So we can't count on that. That's a one-time, actually, to be perfectly accurate, it's a 2 years in a row where that money's been there, thank God, and will help cushion us. We are about $150,000 in deficit on snow and ice. This absurd weekend that we just had, and I say absurd because, if it's going to snow, it's snow already, just let it happen. And then guys will go out and clean it up, and it'll be over. This was about a $75,000 weekend because we just had to keep going out, and you'd put salt down, and then it would rain. Or there'd be enough moisture where the stuff would wash away. It would snow again, freeze up again. The guys would go back out, and it's just a big expense. Those are the bad storms. We would be better off with 18 inches of snow than have a long duration snowstorm like that. So that's this fiscal year, not to be confused with next fiscal year, but it makes us think about, well, when it comes to capital, what's available, in terms of free cash. That, in a nutshell, is where a lot of the uncertainties are. On the expense side, I sound like a broken record, right? We rarely have large increases in expenses. We have a number of retirements or other employment changes this year, so we've had a lot of upward mobility in the police department. We had a lieutenant retired, and one of our more senior patrol officers is in the process of seeking retirement. So that created 2 positions, and everybody kind of moved up at a lower rate of pay. So when you look at the police, you'll see a lot of stability in their salary structure as a result of that. So it gives me room to negotiate with the union as well. So wherever they were going to be, I've got some flexibility to deal with them.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
about that? So when they retire, do the ones that are like on dispatch move up? Or do they go outside and bring in new officers?
We haven't had to do that, from what I can tell, in a long time, and that question is best served to Chief Miglianico. But his pattern is to hire people as reserve officers and put them on dispatch so that they get into the rhythm of the way we operate, and then when full-time positions become available, multiple applications are received. And they go to the academy at that point. Not the reserve officer training, but the full-time academy. So we've got one in the academy right now. That's good news. We're very saddened that Suzanne is going to retire. She has a wealth of knowledge and has the ability to get a lot of work done without having to reinvent the wheel, because she's done it so many times, and she knows people's patterns and is able to anticipate. She is a top step employee, and she's been here for a very long time. So we're going to post that position internally. I'm going to be bringing that job description and posting to the Board of Selectmen, because they are my partner in this hire, because the position is really the executive assistant to the board, just happens to work in the same office as me and on the day-to-day. So the 6 of us will be putting that out. We decided to put that out internally to give people the opportunity who've worked here for a long time to step up to the role. So we've had to rewrite the job description and go through some work there. There will be a time during this fiscal year where Suzanne is still on the payroll, and her replacement will be paid at the rate that he or she will get while in training. So there's a little bit of a double up front. And then I believe the timing of the retirement is such that next fiscal year we'll have a little bit extra to carry forward to pay out Suzanne's vacation time that will accrue to her after, so she's going to retire right after the turn of the fiscal year, so she gets an accrual of vacation time, which nobody's going to resent for a long-term employee. So there'll be this brief overlap in that position. It's a good job. I think after looking at the benchmark study for the whole state, our rate of pay is actually competitive. It's a little bit higher, just because Suzanne's more senior than many of her colleagues in other towns. So I think we're in a sweet spot. We should be able to fill the position. Meeting taker, minute taker, has been quite the adventure. So nobody answered. It's kind of like shouting down a well. somebody answered, so, we did an interview and made a hire. We think we made a good hire. There's always an adjustment period. It's a challenge to be a minute taker for so many boards. There are some members in common, but for the most part, they're all new faces and, public hearings and people garble. Howard D'Amico, Sagamore, whatever, right? So all of that. So we've been working with Ashley. So Ashley Pomes resigned. Ashley Brazo is the minute taker. Welcome, Ashley, to the FinCom. I've asked her to prioritize planning board because just the sheer volume of topics that need to be caught up so that they can continue their business. And they are, of course, having public hearings. So they're subject to appeals and various procedures. Concom similarly, but not to the same extent as the planning board. So that's where the priority is. And we have to assign priorities. Now, I did tell Ashley that in the time being, if she's having difficulty catching up with the whole backload, because it's just about a month of backload, that, of course, this is how it works. After she applied, a bunch of resumes came in. There are people that are interested and that are qualified and that know the town. So either they could be temps and help out, or maybe she wants to split up some of the boards and do some and not others. That's going to be, I'm going to leave that to her call. It was first come, first serve. She got the hire, she got the job. She can arrange it for what works for her. But I'm not losing any sleep over minute taking. I think we're going to have the whole thing covered. Bill's position, the Director of Community Development, is obviously, he did a lot for the town. He was very active in a lot of different places. And so 2 weeks' notice wasn't a lot of time to just get a handle on what he's doing and how to keep it all going forward, and at the same time, take the opportunity presented to consider the role, consider the processes, build consensus around what we want. It's getting harder and harder to find the consensus. It's like, it's like trying to pick up a watermelon seed, right? The open question, I heard you guys discussing it offline. The open question is whether or not a town of this size needs a registered professional engineer in the role, or whether or not an arrangement where a qualified planning professional with a lot of experience can manage those engineers that are hired with so-called 53G accounts, which the applicant pays. We hire the right professional, the applicant pays for the time. That system, not to sound like a government studies geek or anything, but that system creates a very strong set of incentives that are good. If I know I'm on the hook for an expensive and highly qualified 53G engineer, when I hire my engineer to work for me, I want to make sure I hire the right person and get good work, because if I hire the wrong person and the plans come in, they're all chuckwad and nothing adds up, now the reviewing engineer that I'm also paying for is spending ridiculous amounts of time having to correct the work. And there are people recently who've been through this experience. They didn't enjoy it one bit. And I didn't feel bad for them, because it's, you send in electronic plans and a set of hard copy plans, and the two things are not the same project, but you say they are. There's a big difference between a 12-inch drainage pipe and an 8-inch drainage pipe. If you have two sets of people working on two completely different sets of plans, they don't talk to each other. No kidding. Our reviewing engineer caught it, and it delayed the project for a couple of months while all those mistakes were fixed. I think what becomes a negative spiral is when you have your own, let me back up for a second. So based on what I just said, I think it's fair to say, theoretically, there is an amount of engineering that must be done on every project for it to be done right. Call it X. Who's going to get the burden of paying for X? If the burden is shifted entirely onto the applicant, then good things should happen, because the applicant wants to save money. It's not up to us to save the applicant money. It's up to us to defend the interests of the town. When you take some portion of X and you internalize it, and you say, well, instead of paying for a $70,000 or $75,000 a year planning agent, I'm going to pay for a $100,000 a year town engineer, you've taken $25,000 and made it your problem Now, the occupant of the position, the members of the planning board, the town administrator, everybody feels obligated to justify that 25,000. You know, is it being utilized to its maximum potential for the benefit of the town, or is it too hard to do? In other words, I want the person to be an expert, but I don't want that person to fill out the application for the applicant, because that's not a proper regulatory role.
Matt, are you suggesting we're going to see a request for a lower funded position?
No.
Where are you
Good
going?
thought, good
That's where
thought.
you're
So where I'm going with that is, I think a combination of, there's two possibilities. One is, go the route you've been on, have the engineer manage a lot of their own admin. So Bill did a lot of his own electronic filing and creation of a database. He did all that himself for a very long time. This had nothing to do with Maria's hours being reduced. It was the way he did his work. So you can go that route and stick with a part-time clerk and a part-time conservation agent. Another opportunity would be to get a very experienced planning board agent and increase the amount of administrative support so that the planning board agent is only looking at the substance of the matter and the policy considerations and amping up the customer service, first and foremost, to the planning board. So, being very engaged in the procedural aspects of an application. So babysitting, you do realize that if you don't come in here with your revisions in 7 days, that you're going to miss the advertising deadline. Just really hand-holding people and making them get through the process, because a lot of times people just fall short. But that's not the same thing as saying, well, you should do it this way, or you should do it that way, and that'll get approved. Because that one person doesn't have the authority to say that. Only the planning board can say that. So it's, obviously, this is what I am losing sleep over almost every single night, because we've got to get the position filled. I told the planning board the other night, my goal was to fill this in 4 weeks. In the interim, the reserve fund transfer that we're proposing to you tonight is we would work with CMRPC, we'd get somebody to provide about 8 hours a week of active engagement in the docket, and then providing some consulting to review our processes and procedures and compare them to best practices in the central Massachusetts region, see if we're in alignment with other towns.
So Matt, is it to replace that position with to be determined position, or kind of a carbon copy of what?
I think it's to inform the conversation as amongst the selectmen and the town administrator and the planning board and the conservation commission about what's the best way to configure that whole department to get what we need.
Yeah.
There are a lot of good things that happen there. I don't want to lose the good things. And then there are some things that I think need improvement. I don't think it's necessary to go into that in an open meeting.
It might be.
So, for instance, I want more upfront investment on interaction with people who are about to file an application to avoid significant pitfalls. Because I don't know that it's fair to take a reactive posture to people and say, submit your plans, and then I will write up the results. And that may be 2 or 3 weeks from now at a planning board meeting. So now I'm at a planning board meeting, and I'm going to go through, well, you might be afoul of zoning here, you might be afoul of Concom here, and this, that, and the other. Well, now the planning board's going to continue your application, probably for 2 weeks. But you may not be able to respond in 2 weeks. It might be a whole month. So we're starting to push projects out. It's okay to slow things down in order to get it right. The way I was trained in this field was you do conceptual review up front. It's not a planning board process. Tech review is what it's called in a lot of jurisdictions, technical review. Was the purview, at least in my career, was the purview of the town administrator. Because I would get everybody in the room that needed to be in the room. Fire chief, police chief, highway superintendent, Concom agent, and we wouldn't get into detailed feedback. We wouldn't have the authority to approve anything, but we did this just today. We put the plans up on a map, up on the screen, and we say, well, this issue is going to take you towards zoning. The following rules apply to that situation, your engineer should advise you on how to deal with this, or your attorney should advise you on how to deal with this. Number one, that manages expectations. So it's a high level of customer service delivery, because now somebody comes in, you know how the private sector works, let's build a building, let's build it yesterday, you know, and they pour the foundation and up it goes and they're all done, right? Municipal processes don't work like that. And I think a lot of times people, we had a good example, the bid package for Webster Street. So they're going to build a cannabis retail location at the end of Webster Street, right?
So hold on.
In their timeline.
Hold on. If I may,
Yeah.
I would ask you to keep a little more focused just toward giving us a projection toward when we might see a budget, when we might see department numbers.
So why did you even bother asking me about the position then? So, end of,
Well, just so a certain level of detail would be great, and I just don't want to get too far afield. Matt,
I'm sorry to have wasted your time.
you have,
Do you have any questions? I'll be happy to answer questions.
I think one thing that strikes me, Matt, is when
It's ridiculous.
we moved to hiring the town engineer back in 91 or whenever that was, one of the ideas was that idea of that sort of upfront, let's do that conceptual stuff first to make it more efficient. Did that sort of drift away a little bit then? I mean, because you were just saying that was one thing that you think would be a nice thing in that department, is that kind of initial.
I didn't see it done in the 3.5 years I was, I was never invited to one. I would get out maybe an email, but to get back to the point I was making, we've had recently a plan submitted or a project outlook submitted that thought they were going to get through their permitting in a month. And that's absurd. So somebody's going to step in up front and provide people with a lay of the land. And that's why, we asked town meeting for the economic development facilitator position, is to work with people from that step up to the point where they get to the planning board. By the time they get to the planning board, their application should be really quite consistent and full and ripe for their action. They have so much in their pipeline, they could spend 2 hours on a really solid proposal instead of 6 or 8. And that's what I'm trying to resolve.
So would the CMRPC person in the gap or persons in the gap, would that be kind of to maintain some sort of housekeeping until?
Yeah, we're just going to tread water
Okay.
for 3 or 4 weeks. Their docket is, they're meeting every week. Every other week, they're on this Blackstone Valley Logistics project, that's the 3 towns. Those meeting minutes are being taken by another town. The engineering has been outsourced to Graves. There's no particularly pressing need for anybody to represent the town, and I can represent the town. I'm an economic development guy from my background, so if I have lots of feedback on all the stuff that's been submitted. I don't think I'm going to miss too much that Graves wouldn't catch. What we need is just the help with their docket. So there may be a number of A&R plans. I know there's at least one preliminary plan coming in for an industrial subdivision. They just need somebody to do that initial round of review and feedback so that their meetings will be productive. Again, they can vote to hire the 53G, and I strongly encourage them to do that, because I think that's the best way to go right now, at least in the interim. So those are the 2 options that are on my mind. What I want to do, though, to drive to the bottom line is I don't want to come in with anything higher than we had projected. I see the need for some additional admin support, but I can't put my thumb on exactly what it is I want that person to do.
additional from before Maria's hours were cut or after they were?
Different. So by additional, I mean different.
Are you saying because Bill did so much of that kind of stuff himself?
He did a lot of it, and a lot of what he was working on, we're changing just because of our IT network infrastructure. So I don't want to get into too many details, I don't want to bore you, but he had a database. It was not resident on our network, it was resident in the cloud, in the SQL server that was with the old website, Mitch Cohen's website, which we pay for. We want to migrate, we're taking this whole town to Microsoft and away from Google for a number of reasons I won't get into. But that allows us to take his database now that he's not here and he's not using it, not wedded to it, and dump it into our network and make it something we all have access to. I need that person who's in the 2021 level of IT skills to facilitate meetings, to do collaborative document sharing and construction. That's a demo, I didn't buy that, but I might. That's a smart board. So we had 2 meetings today, one with the union where I went through all of both sides' proposals, and we were able to mark up sheets and do math and everything else, and at the end of it, I pressed print, and within 15 minutes, everybody who was in the meeting had the results of the meeting of our negotiation session. We did a tech review for industrial subdivision. There wasn't a lot of, it's a very cut and dried, straightforward proposal from my perspective. But we were able to circle items, so you're definitely going to get questions about this and that, and again, provide the applicant with the feedback right away. That's what I need. I need that person who can do that, because I don't want to do it. Who can step up and really make everything work, and it has to work with e-permitting, because we spent the money. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to get involved with the vendor for the e-permitting project, because they overbuilt this thing, and now it's like getting a law school degree to get a building permit. That wasn't the idea. The idea was to make it easy for people so they don't have to come in here and wear a mask and all that stuff. So that's what I need. I need that person who can ride trow on the project and get it all done. I still have Maria, whose knowledge of our surety accounts and other planning board activities, and she's been doing this for 30-some-odd years. So I'm not anxious to replace her on that. And some of the other things that she does around the office is just that part-time. If we fill her time with labor-intensive activities, she's got not enough hours to do it. If we make the labor-intensive activities more technology-reliant, and we have the right person doing that, I think we can get away with our budget for the department. So I'm sorry, that is long-winded, but.
Where do you post these job positions you have to fill?
So that would be an external posting. We may have to spend a fair amount of money. All right, so the Worcester Telegram and Gazette for sure. There's professional associations for planners and engineers and others who are in the field. They have their own newsletters. The MMA, we're a member. I don't think we pay to advertise in the Beacon. I don't think we do. I think outside entities have to, but.
They used to charge, I don't know if they.
Even if they charge, it's $100-something bucks. Now, the question is, what do you do next? Do you do Providence Journal? Do you do Boston Globe? Do you Hartford Current? Proximity, the Journal, or some other Providence-based entity might be the best way to go. Not necessarily want a Rhode Island planner, though. So, I haven't made up my mind exactly, but it does have to be a major newspaper with significant circulation. Now, when you advertise in the Telegram Gazette, you get these electronic services that they automatically feed it out to. Sometimes the resumes are good, sometimes they're not.
I have a question. How many projects a year would you say we have?
Oh, boy.
Just rough.
The accurate answer is that every year is different.
Okay.
So for this year, the answer is imprecisely a lot. All right. If you look at the typical docket for the planning board, they may have 3 or 4 A&R, which is approval not required. They hear it anyway. I don't know. But,
Yeah, it's weird.
it's not required, but, and 1 or 2 site plan review, which may have varying levels of complexity, and then 2 or 3 subdivisions every couple of months, some more complicated than others. Right now, they have a couple of big ones. So Carol Gogolinski has got a project over on Gilboa Court, the end there, with duplexes. So she's changed her mind a couple of times what she wants to do. There's this industrial subdivision that has just come in. There's a couple others that aren't finished yet. So the hardest thing to replace, Bill, on are those projects which are either approved already and are waiting for lots to be released for development. There are checklists that have to be completed before we start releasing lots and letting people build and get building permits. That's where, we're going to be hard pressed to step up and get that done. So we're going to need Maria's help, and we're going to need some staff internally to step up.
How does it work budget-wise when someone who's, full-time and getting paid by the town leaves, like Bill does, but before the fiscal year ends? And then the money is needed to do the CMRPC thing. Is that all real clear on? And then when the new budget is approved in the spring, will that be for Bill's replacement by then, or could it be some CMRPC for a while yet? How does that work?
So when an employee's been with the town for a long time, when they leave in the middle of the fiscal year, chances are they have a lot of vacation time that they haven't used.
Okay.
So somebody who's been here as long as, Bill was at 6 weeks, right? Yeah, 6, and he may have had 5 left or 4 left.
He had a lot of time left.
So, so we got to pay that out. So that's basically salary for that. So for the entire month that he's not here and there's nobody in the job, we're still paying the budget out for that month.
Right.
Then that's the biggest consideration.
Well, and you have to look at the difference between how the budget's voted. We vote salary and expense. So
Yeah.
CMRPC is an outside consultant. It has to be paid for out of the expense budget. I can't use the salary money to pay for that. And the only way to do that is through the reserve fund transfer now, look at town meeting to either transfer from the salary line to the expense line, or, see where the new hire is going to be. In the case of Suzanne's position, for instance, and I spoke about this at the last town meeting, we'll look to overlap that position that we did not intend to have. So now we have at least 5 weeks of salary prior to a town meeting, so we may need a reserve fund for that. Again, we're voted salary and expense, unlike the school department, who is voted one line. We are selectmen, town accountant, it's just each department stands on its own, salary, expense. So there's we budget very tightly, so we just don't have the flexibility.
Very tightly. So we just entered the actuals against budgeted for the last year that we just closed, and I think the majority of our employees, we were within $1.
Yeah, no, I'm a little disappointed that we were that far off.
We have to round up. We have to round up.
In my defense, we don't have pennies in budgets.
Fair enough. Fair enough, then. All right.
So we do.
With that explanation, then, kudos.
We do have some issues that are coming up that, as Howard calls us, the super special fund that you have, reserve fund, that we will need to help us bridge these transitions.
Sure.
What happens, just by way of conversation, let's say you have a fully salaried person who's worked for a long time, and then something happens, say a medical thing or something, and they have to retire early. What happens to the rest of the money they would have been paid then?
The money stays in the account unless town meeting moves it.
I see, okay.
So, for instance, if we'll use Bill's position.
Yeah.
If it was vacant because we had to take it out, but then you hire somebody and they have to give a notice, so there's a vacancy of 3 or 4 weeks. That money sits in that account until either town meeting moves it or we do an interdepartmental transfer to move it.
I see, okay.
And then if none of that happens, it closes into free cash.
I see, okay.
So again, it's, we're voted so tight, and we're voted with those parameters where I can't use the salary line to pay CMRPC. I don't have the authority to do that.
Unless you get rid of mandamus, right?
No, because she doesn't have the authority to do it. You can't compel her to do it.
Sound like William Marbury there, man.
This year's challenging with the movement of personnel.
Yeah.
And
And we have another
unexpected
retirement this fall.
movement. It wasn't, Suzanne had the plan to retire
assessor.
The assessor?
at this time, so it's unexpected. It wasn't, we didn't know in advance. Where the principal assessor is retiring in December of next year, we know that in advance. We know that we're going to have an overlap in there, so we know that's going to be built into the budget. These other two
Who is that?
positions were mid-year.
Beth McKay.
Yeah, So we're planning for that piece, but these were not
Yeah,
expected
they weren't
transitions.
Okay.
So MCRPC?
CMRPC, Central Massachusetts
the one.
Regional Planning
That
Council.
makes sense. So to Dick's question, are they a fill-in of the position a little bit? And what I thought you said, they're also kind of going to help give guidelines or guidance to you and the board on, to what you were addressing, what might be the best refilling of the department itself?
Correct.
They're looking to do a little bit of both. Okay. And what's this authorization we've got for 10,000? What period does that cover?
What, I'm sorry?
I think with the reserve fund transfer, it says $10,000.
That would put money into the expense account so that we can hire them to pretty much fill this bridge gap.
We will have a contract.
For how long, Gene?
Yeah, I guess to Dick's, how long at the moment? So when was Bill's last day?
Last week.
Last week.
February 12th.
Feb 12th, okay. Give or take
A week and a half, yeah.
Give or take $1.
Yeah,
Yeah, okay, Feb 12th.
38 cents.
Exactly. So, and we haven't advertised the position yet at all, right?
No, so I got the job description almost done for the boards, for the review of all the stakeholders. Everybody wants me to hurry, but so they're going to have to get me their feedback in a hurry if they want me to hurry. But as soon as I have it, I'll post it. I have to post it for 10 business days.
So I'm not clear on how that overlaps with the CMR.
CMRPC, so we're going to have a contract with them for,
What you said, that you were looking to them to give you guidance of how to structure
yeah, that's
it.
going to come up front. So at the same time as we're shopping it to the stakeholders, they're involved in the conversation, because I think they have this information at their fingertips.
Sorry, what do you mean shopping to the stakeholders?
Taking the job description and getting feedback from the planning board,
Okay.
the Concom, the board of
All right,
selectmen,
okay.
the staff.
But you're not going to post it yet for an open position
So my-
until CMR has been in for a while?
No, I intend to post it in about 2 weeks. I'm going to give everybody about a week and a half, 2 weeks, then post it for 2 weeks, and then try to fill it as quickly as possible. Now, if that person is in an employment, they're going to have to give their bosses 2 weeks' notice, so there'll be that time.
I'm trying to understand what you were talking about a little before, of considering reshaping the department a little bit.
Yep.
But is the post going to address that, or will it just be a post of what Bill's position's job description was?
The posting will be whatever the consensus arrives at we want the job description to be. And that conversation will be informed in part by data shared with us by CMRPC.
That's what I was getting at. Are they already in place?
So he started working today. The contract's not signed yet, but he was willing to attend the meeting.
That's what I was looking at. Okay, thank you.
Okay, I get it too. So we've already kind of asked them to look at the department or
Okay.
pulled them in already.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
Got things.
And so you might be 4, 6, 8 weeks from a replacement, depending on.
4 to 6. I really don't want to go beyond that, because if we go beyond that, it'll be a lot of work on us, those of us who don't really want to do planning
Right.
stuff.
And who are the stakeholders again?
What's the date of the time?
First and foremost, the planning board.
Okay.
Because that position serves as their key advisor and preparation.
Yeah.
Concom,
Yeah.
to some extent. The Conservation Commission has an agent, a part-time agent, that does most of their work. But they still have to interact with a planning agent, because it's the same thing, right? It's a project moving through the process. The Building Facilities Committee used to use a lot of Bill's services. And so did I and the Board of Selectmen. Bill assisted with grant writing and certain forms of procurement. So the procurements we did under Chapter 7 and Chapter 149, so building projects and design, I reversed that. Chapter 7 is design professionals, 149 is building, public building projects, and 3039M, which is public works. So we, for instance, Cedar Street Bridge, an outside engineering firm did all that for us. They did the spec, they did the bid documents, and they helped us with the opening of the bids. And they will be on site to do the inspections. But Bill still oversaw the workflow for that entire project, made sure that the I's got dotted and the T's crossed. So we're backfilling all of that at the same time. Some of that's going to fall to my office. So I expect I will be more involved with building facilities than Mr. Kozinski ever was.
Okay, thank you.
Do we know how long the $10,000 runs for? What it funds?
So until we sign a contract, I don't know what her terms are. Yeah.
Okay, all right, okay. But you might come back, you might have to come back for more, depending on how long they're in place.
I actually put it as a placeholder on the town meeting to both increase salary and increase expense, because we're not going to know which direction we're going to be until the position gets posted
Right.
and we,
Right.
you know, the timeline of the applicant.
Okay.
You could have someone that has to give a month's notice, so.
Do we have background on why Bill left?
You know, I don't read other people's minds. I mean, I know what he says he thought, but, you know, I mean, he has a resignation letter if you want to see it. I mean, he didn't,
Can we see that? Sure.
he wasn't comfortable with some of the changes that we needed to put in place, and didn't see eye to eye with some of them. You know, these things get wrapped into, you know, what somebody gets from their job, what they want from their job. I think that for some, being a trained engineer and being, you know, really smart about what you're doing, and you can't take that away from Bill, he's brilliant. Where he's going, so he's going to the town of Spencer, and he's the highway superintendent / town engineer. So he's not getting applications from the public, he's directly involved in fixing problems and doing the best possible job at fixing problems. In a town that's a lot like this, you know, because he likes that, the stormwater issues, the rural, you know, all of the factors that go into it. I think it was a combination of he had a good opportunity and he was less and less comfortable here. I think a lot of long-term employees, and I have to wax philosophical about this for a second, just bear with me.
Run.
A lot of people, and all of us, I think we've all been, our careers in some places are like an upside down, a parabola, is that get the right shape? The things that make us really good and attractive as an employee, that we build really strong systems and help our organization get ahead, can sometimes also pull us back down. You know, so if you're highly detail-oriented, there's a point at which people will say, will you just stop with the details and listen to what I'm trying to say about my project? So I think, you know, I think we're on that cycle too, from my lens, okay? Because it takes two to tango, and that was my lens. And I felt like, yeah, we needed the help with economic development up front, because I wanted the first interaction somebody from the outside has with the town of Douglas to be of a certain nature. We're here to help you. We want you to be here. You know, projects are difficult, timelines can be difficult, but if you're open and honest with us, we'll be open and honest with you, and this is how we're going to work together. And I didn't like the reactive posture, because I think it put us in a position of always leading with no. It's like a boxer leading with their chin. Potter Road. You know? So, you know, having said that, you know, yeah, you know, he calls out communication. He wanted, you know, more communication. I don't know how much more there could have been from my perspective. When we did cost savings, I came to the Board of Selectmen and I came to the Finance Committee, and I was pretty upfront about what those range of options were. And one of them included changing the hours of staff in that office. And a disagreement is not a failure of communication, right? If you disagree, you disagree. And in the British way of doing things, if you disagree, you resign, you move on to your next thing. And I think that's pretty much what we got.
So in terms of the budget, once the CMRPC phase is finished and we have Bill's replacement, it's sort of to be determined what that amount would be, right? I mean, if it's somebody fresh out of, at the lower level of the scale or somebody higher. I mean, so as we get ready to make our budget, Matt, will there be a little bit of gray in terms of what the final dollar will be, depending on the experience and the professional
Yeah, well,
level?
this is the other reason to hurry, right? Because if we want a budget by the end of March, then we've got to post this position and fill it and know what those numbers are going to be.
Yeah.
I've noted that the town of Uxbridge is in an advertising phase jointly with Mendon and Millville for a full-time planner at $65,000 to $75,000 a year, and they expect to be successful. And CMRPC is building that job description and moving that along. I try to keep my powder dry because I have a really good sense of what I'm looking for. I don't have an appetite for academic planners. I don't need a study to go on a shelf, or the Euclidean system versus the other system, or whatever it is, Cartesian, I don't know who it was. I'm not interested in that. What I want is somebody who's mindful about processes and procedures and has a mind for details and will learn the subdivision regulations of the town and the other town bylaws that apply, and be a crackerjack in getting things done and maintaining compliance, which is not the same thing as saying, well, we're going to do safe streets and have bike lanes everywhere, right? So that's not what I want. So I'm also, I'll be honest, the one really big mistake I've made in my career in terms of a bad hire was a planner. So I walk around with this like dread, the sword of Damocles hanging over my head, right? I just don't want to make a mistake on this. I want to make sure that people are unified behind what they want, and if everybody can't get exactly what they want, they're at least willing to compromise with each other, so that we're not setting somebody up to fail in what is a very high visibility, high responsibility role with the town. So it's a lot of work to do in a short period of time. It has to be done quickly.
Any other questions for Matt? So that just goes back then to my question. You said we'd start to see a proposed budget late March?
Yeah.
Okay.
I guess my question to you, Mr. Chairman, and through you to your board is, how much appetite do you have for WIP, for work in progress? You want to see the edits as they're made, because you can see that now. I can share that on a OneDrive, invite
like
you.
that.
And I've always welcomed that, so I've always wanted you to take the spreadsheet and play with it.
It gives me physical numbers in front of me to work off of versus a whole lot of dialogue.
Yep.
The numbers, even if they're going to move, and you say, these are going to move a little, or be aware. But the whip is kind of perfect. I think traditionally we've had that.
All right,
And I know a couple of times, a meeting or two ago, we came in, we had the building department in, and they just didn't have math for us to see, and it was different. It felt different for me. I don't know about everybody else. So that would be fantastic, candidly, if that's relatively, look, I don't want to
I agree.
reinvent an algorithm for the snowplow budget over the last 30 years.
Right, exactly.
Hypothetical.
So I guess the only ground rule that
So
I would,
it's easy to do.
it's very easy to share it. So my only ground rule when it comes to that is please ask questions, because I had
But
my
it
own
helps
training for,
everybody, it sounds like,
Yeah.
physically see something. I keep reminding people, and I say
I
it
think we're
only,
more visual learners
Right.
and versus hearing it. I think that would be helpful for most of the people here. I can track you all day long.
yeah,
But I live in this world.
yeah.
And because I live in this world, I understand it.
And I don't live in this world, and I've always said, I concede, I don't think it's a shock. I come to the meeting, and I show up. And the more you can have for me to look at, we're all doing other things. You guys work it day in, day out, day in, day out. You say things and know things, and you've got all sorts of context. And we don't have any of that context.
Yep.
So I find the math gives me
Right.
some, like you said, that's my context. That's what I get as a base and work off of that.
So if you were to send us something and we had a question, do we respond to the group? Is that the correct protocol for,
Oh, I think in the meeting, right?
or do we take it to a meeting, all our questions?
You gotta be careful, you gotta be careful of the open meeting law. so-
I think it's really
Right,
better.
right, that's what I want to know. What
Yeah.
can we,
It can just be done in the meetings, right?
okay.
It's understood that it's WIP, that it's work in process. That,
Yeah.
you know, you've been good each year telling us, this is a draft year.
Yeah.
Howard, you're going to see this in 2 more weeks tighter in this category, in this category. But without that start,
Right.
it's felt the earth, I don't have anywhere to put my feet.
I
Yeah.
think most of the people here don't have an appreciation for where we are, because we don't have a number in front of us, where we're used to having that spreadsheet,
Yeah.
just historically speaking, where I think it is value added to have that information where people can go in there, and then if they do have the question, come to the meeting, we're prepared, you
Yeah.
can show us what you have.
Yeah, I mean, if there's an appetite for it, I welcome it, because this is what I've always wanted. I've always put the spreadsheet out there. I don't like just like blasting it out, because I think then I have version control issues.
Right,
And if
right.
I correct an obvious typo, because those things happen,
Yeah.
then I got to go back through it and explain it to a million people.
Literally, you
But-
can put in the blast or how it comes through, this is a draft.
Yeah, so
All
work
they
in,
need to see
work in
is
progress is
this is
not,
draft.
work in progress is not a public document.
Yep, yep,
So
understood.
I'll put it in the OneDrive, and you'll get an invitation to access the OneDrive, and there will be that and all of my written, because when I make edits in the spreadsheet, I write a memo to you. They'll all be there, the fiscal notes, and as I edit the budget, you'll be able to see it. So I only have 2 quick ground rules. One is if you see an obvious mistake, like, I autofilled a 0, and please let me know. That's not a meeting thing. But secondly, what is the approach? So my approach is, I try to work the budget to a substantial surplus as the starting point for the conversation. I don't come into it in the red and then try to reduce to get to
Right,
0.
right.
I try to get a fairly strong number in the black. Because if the worst things comes to worst and we don't know where to put it, we'll put it in OPEB, because God knows that it can go there. And then if there are options, if there are policy options, I usually create them as switches that you can turn on and off. Are we going to hire somebody or not? And if you turn it on, you see the budget impact. If you turn it off, so there's this, in the spreadsheet, there is a place where you make decisions as to what scenario you want to see on your own. So if you think, well, I think Matt's okay with 6% in health insurance, but I wonder what happens if it's 8%.
Oh, yeah.
You put in, you type in
I'm not
8,
doing that.
if you type in 8,
I'm working off what you propose.
so as you scroll to the bottom of that, you'll see the bottom line. If you accept all the assumptions above, the bottom line will be this.
You know, what we've talked about over the years is the view that that's your proposal. Theoretically, it'll match the Board of Selectmen's proposal, and whether we want to switch 6 to 8 is something to address. But you're coming at us, whatever. But what your proposal is the 6, and that's what you come and present to us, and it's up to us to decide whether there's an adjustment we want to make. Gene, would you be able to print those out and bring them to a meeting without violating that draft concern you've got?
Well, Gene doesn't have to print it out. I mean, I can print it out.
Well, but I'm
It doesn't have to
saying,
go to Gene. But yes, we do, if you remember, we come in with the ledger paper, and that's.
I do remember.
That's what I have.
Yeah.
yeah. You know, I
Yeah, we like
remember
those.
somebody pressing you for books, but we won't go into that.
Yeah, but we-
Oh, I just did, but I don't want the books. I don't want-
Okay, from time to time, I add pages to Roger's thesaurus. whatever.
Exactly. So we're in peace.
So one
So
thing,
you can print out and bring us or I guess what I'm looking for is we've got departments in. Having those departments' 2022 proposed budget at that moment in front of us, particularly with a comparison 2021, 2020, right? Actual 2020, status 2021, projected 2022. And we've seen that, right? Since the day you got
So
in.
you get 6
you can-
years of history
you
and
can-
5 years of forecast.
Yeah, that's what you,
pretty
yeah,
much.
right? And we can get that?
Yes.
That'd be great. Is that everybody?
Yeah,
for
sounds
privilege?
great.
So I've just always, I'll tell you, I've always been reluctant only because I never had you actually say you're comfortable with work in progress. If you are, I'm all for it.
Yeah.
Let's do it collaboratively. It's way better
Yeah, very
than,
cool. Yeah.
than
So
projection,
Yeah.
proposal rejection.
what's
No, no, no.
our proposed town meeting date?
May 4, May 3,
May 3rd?
right?
In our public meeting for this committee, early April?
Suzanne's done the timeline. Should we
Yeah,
just circulate
It
it?
is early April.
Okay, that's fine
This is
for
going
now.
to be,
Okay.
All right.
We've got 2 meetings in March. We're now compacting things. Right, this will be the latest we've ever seen. So today, I was asked to move the school committee, or the school budget department, to a later date, just a couple of weeks. What did we go from the 9th to the 23rd? And we accommodated that, right? We're trying to
So
get,
I think, like I say, typically it's been the 3rd or 4th week of March when we actually publish something. I think this year's a little bit hairier, and we need to get started because of May 3 is early. But I think in the past, we were May 7, May 8, even May
sure, yeah.
11th or 12th, so we had time.
Yeah, sure, fair, yeah.
I'm disappointed that Dr. Fitzpatrick didn't actually come here, expected him to be here today, and I'm not going to be at the meeting in 2 weeks, so I like hearing about the BBT stuff, because I really...
Yeah. You're an advocate, yeah.
No, well, no, I just mean about
Yeah.
my piece that really bothers me every year is the insurance.
Yeah.
I mean, my renewals are coming in for my businesses, I'm seeing 40% increases, right? It's ridiculous.
But-
He's got to, get
Go
with the
ahead,
program.
Jean.
if you want, please send me your question to him. I will forward that along, and
Sure.
hopefully, I know you probably won't be here, but he'll have to answer the
Yeah,
question.
we can- thank
So
you,
at
Jean.
least you would have it to
I
review
might
it.
just come in from my vacation in Aruba.
Right?
Don't forget,
Yeah.
I have better things to do on my vacation.
Yeah, exactly.
I prefer not to, but
I get it, I get it, yeah.
She,
Your
Heather
choice.
has come in on her
I
vacation.
have, I'm,
Yeah. So I'm not going to require that he come in person. I don't think that's appropriate these days. So if that's how he chooses to come in again via Zoom, that's fine, kind of thing. Okay, anything else before we get to the reserve fund transfer? Anything else for Matt? I would like that letter, please. All right?
is this like a record of the amount of time you've had to actually speak nonstop?
no,
No. No.
no.
All right, thank you very much. Can we move to, we don't have any minutes, right? So a motion to approve the request for transfer from the reserve fund for $10,000. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
No, you-
Dick making the motion
Yep.
and Heather seconding the motion. I think we're going to need a roll call vote. So Dick, starting with you, a
Okay,
vote.
so Dick Vandenberg, aye.
Sandy Kuiper's aye.
Heather Moore and I.
Linda Zolli, aye.
Howard D'Amico, aye. Then we need to each initial it, correct?
Correct. You're gonna
3
put that-
copies?
There were 3 copies in front of you. You will put that it was approved, the number of people voting, and you would sign and they would initial.
Okay.
Matt, is it possible to generate from the big spreadsheet to summarize stuff, say on a 1-page thing, like a graph on one page that just showed a 5-year arc? Or can it shrink it to that minimal kind of thing?
So I would ask that if there is a graphic that you would find especially helpful, I can create it,
Okay,
and it will update as the spreadsheet updates.
okay.
It's more information, it's
You need,
all I ever did forever was draw
I
charts.
could
from
email you
numbers,
a
right?
graph I'd like to see or
Just,
something.
yeah, exactly. And that'll be part of it. The spreadsheet is set up to create the budget as it appears in the FinCom flyer and the warrant. So that, it's one thing to look at the budget details, another thing, what are you going to show the taxpayer at town meeting?
Gotcha, yeah.
So it's set up to automatically fill from, that's not hard to do. It's simple. But the background worksheets would be any details, so health insurance, for instance, the census drives it as much as the rates. So we put both, and then we take the outcome of that and put it into the main
Hire young
budget.
people.
excuse me?
I have no idea. Did somebody just say something?
Wow.
Because I just had a flashback like Toucan Sam and,
I just had a flashback to litigation. and
yeah, what?
and-
What?
yeah.
The L word? I don't say the L word.
Are there 2 sheets of paper?
You should go on vacation.
You need a vacation. That's okay to say, even in 2021.
That's right.
Maybe you should take a little vacation.
Want to give those?
Nobody minds us saying that.
So these are for Gene. We're all set?
Oh, they
Any
go to
other
you?
motions?
Howard, do you need to sign this?
I think I signed all 3.
I think you did, yeah.
All right. Never mind.
Do I make a motion to adjourn here?
Yeah.
I did.
Second?
Sandy with a motion to adjourn, Dick with a second, voice vote, all in favor?
Aye.
Against? We're adjourned.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.